Welcome to the Irish NFL show, and welcome in particular to those of you who are watching us on YouTube Live. Not that those of you who are listening to us in podcast form after the event are any less welcome, but as we sit here now, it's just over 48 hours. Let me do the maths here. 52 hours and 17 minutes. Am I right there to kick off as the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Detroit Lions in the season opener? Obviously, a very exciting time of the season. The talking is about to be done, and the time, to borrow a phrase from Dan Campbell, for the biting of kneecaps is about to get underway. And I've got to say, that's a great season opener, lads. I'm really looking forward to that. And I know we'll be talking about the games in detail closer to the time, so we won't spoil our picks or get into it too much. But it's a pretty good season opener, I have to say. There was a little bit of nervousness, I think, initially when the Lions were announced as the opening day opponent for the Chiefs. But as the offseason has gone on, I think that's looking like it's going to be a pretty spicy game.
Yeah, certainly is. Bearing in mind how so much credit the Lions have got for the offseason and how excited everybody is around this particular team. And we're going to get to it shortly in terms of who we're picking for that particular division in the NFC North. But there's so many people that are so high on the Lions, and we were fortunate to have a number of NFL media people on throughout the course of the offseason, and they all suggested this Lions team is for real. So we'll be interested to see what the picks are. And I think the game is getting even more interesting because of the nature of what's happened over the course of the last 48 hours. Andy Reid, very much, I have no idea when Chris Jones is showing up. And then obviously today, we've got the news that Travis Kelce has his potential knee injury that could rule him out of the game, which kind of brings it back to a little bit more of an even keel type of game. So, and a great one you're right, it's a great game to kick off the season.
Yeah, Travis Kelce ruining fantasy drafts across the country, I'd say, at this point in time. But yeah, as you say, we'll get into the game picks and chopping up that game and all the week one slate in detail closer to the time. Tonight, though, we're giving ourselves the last, I guess it's squeaky bum time for those of us talking heads in the NFL commentariat and the wider fan community. We spent the off season poring over joint practices, looking at the draft, seeing who's performing well, trying to see if we can glean any pearls from hard knocks, all of the rest of it, looking at those preseason games, overweighting on some things, probably underweighting on other things. But at the end of it all, we've all nailed our colours fairly firmly to the mast, or maybe we've blue tacked them to the mast at this point, because what we wanted to get through this evening is whether we should stick or twist. That's the title of tonight's show. Are we going to stick to our predictions, or like Chubby Checker and the Fat Boys, sorry, a lot of younger viewers and listeners are going to have to check out that particularly anachronistic pop culture references, or will we be doing the twist? So what we thought we'd do is we'll go through first of all the picks that we feel like we're most confident in. And maybe we'll start with the AFC on that one. I think we're all kind of more or less of a mind here. It's interesting how the consensus worked, at least on the divisional champions for the most part. Aidan, the only outlier there in picking the Steelers for the AFC North, which, to be fair, is a division that looks like it's on a knife edge. Colin, I'll start with you. Of those slate of picks you have for the AFC, who's your absolute banker? Who are you most confident in and not moving from under any circumstances?
I mean, there are it's quite an open, and I think, very interesting AFC, NFC as well. It's very difficult with the news that's come out of Kansas City. Had we recorded this, even last week, I'd have thought, Chris Jones is gonna, it's gonna get sorted. All the talk last week was around Veach getting it done, and then Kelce is so key, and hyperextend your knee when you're almost 34. Don't like that in any way, shape or form. I look at it and I probably, I probably think the one I'm most sure of, despite the fact that they're in the toughest division, I'm going to go with the Bengals, because I just think they are such a complete team and everything is trending in the right direction for Joe Burrow. I think defensively they're so strong. They've kept their coordinators together. They can deal with most injuries, you would imagine. Obviously, look, if Burrow, if that lingers, then that is a huge concern. But that would go if the Chiefs lost Patrick Mahomes. That'd be the same there. I'm going to say I am most confident of the Bengals winning the division, even though I think that the AFC North is the most stacked division in the entire league.
Yeah, I hate to start off the show on a dreary note of consensus, Colin, but I'm going to row right in behind you there. I have to say the Bengals is the pick that actually, if anything, I'm even more confident about than I was when I made it initially. I think of all of those AFC divisions, I think while the AFC North is very much the toughest on paper, they're the team that I just feel has the most to prove this year in a funny sort of a way, because they've got that window where they've got Boyd, Higgins, Jamar Chase, Burrow, all the rest of it all ready to go. They've got the two coordinators who stayed on. We were just saying last week, uniquely among the consensus Super Bowl contenders, they're the only team that's actually kept their two coordinators in harness. So they're ready for this. I know we mentioned before when we were talking to Phoebe Schechter at the live show, she was talking about the buzz in Cincinnati and how the whole town is really rolling and really anticipating something special this season. Not that the last two seasons have exactly been damn squibs, but if you'd asked me 24, 48 hours ago, as you say, which team was I most confident in as far as divisional champs in the AFC, I probably would have said Kansas City, but I've definitely now gone in the direction of Cincinnati after the Travis Kelce hyperextension. We're not throwing in any twists yet, but I just want to thank Shane Brennan for saying he got the chubby checker reference. Shane's only young for as well, so I'm obviously not that away from the target demographic, which is good to hear. Brian, which of those AFC divisional champs on your board are you going to say is your absolute lock?
What's happened to you tonight? I don't get it. We're talking week in, week out about how fantastic this Chiefs team is, and as long as you have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, you've always got a great chance. We've seen the Chiefs lose Tyreek Hill last year. We've seen them find a way to navigate an offense that still found a way to go to the Super Bowl and put up 38 points on an Eagles team and various other games throughout the course of the season. Kelce is ultimately their main man. Yeah, I get that, all that, but like Andy Reid will find another way of scheming around him if he's not available for a period of time. And Chris Jones inevitably will come back. Okay, he might miss this week. Yeah, what's the worst case? He can hold out to week 7. Again, like we spoke about this before, the Chiefs have a way of methodically going through a course of a season, don't look impressive, and then they hit the ground running come December. Let's not get carried away by a couple of things that are not going to take away from this team being thereabouts in a division that, let's not forget, they're going for 8 in a row. So I can't get away from the Chiefs. I do recognize what you're saying on the Bengals. I think, yeah, I'm picking the Bengals. I think they will win the division. I don't think it's as straightforward as many may seem, because I think there's teams in that division that have improved. The Ravens, the Browns, I think have improved, and even the Steelers, albeit I haven't picked them to go to the playoffs, as we'll probably get into when we do the wildcard picks, but it looks like they have improved greatly as well. So get the Bengals, don't get the real ultimate confidence around, because I think there's a team such as the Ravens with Lamar that can really go up against them, as we saw at the end of last season. So I'll stick with the Chiefs as my slam dunk team to win the division this year. Not a great surprise.
I'm going to give myself half an out, though, and hark back to on the last show where I said, apart from Mahomes, Kelce was the one concern I had. If there was any injury doubt over him, I'd start getting slightly worried, given how dependent they have been on him. And I think that revolving carousel, as you say, of wide receivers only works because he's been the mainstay. So at the same time, I hate to bet against Andy Reid scheming something up. Maybe it unlocks something new in the playbook. They've been the most agile and flexible offensive team arguably we've seen in the history of the NFL. So in some ways, it's a challenge that I'm looking forward to seeing Andy Reid get his hands on and see what way he manages to figure that one out while he recovers from the hyperextension, which hopefully won't be a long absence, because let's face it, whether you love or loathe the Chiefs, and I don't think there's too many who loathe them, like you want to see the best players on the pitch and performing at their absolute peak, and he's absolutely decorated the NFL, certainly in the tight end position over the last couple of seasons. Brian, we stay with you then. In terms of wild card picks, which one are you most confident in, and which one are you gonna carve into stone before the season starts?
I'd be very confident in the Ravens. I think they'll bounce back this year. With Lamar now fully fit, having the contract, and we've touched on, I suppose, how aggressive they were in trying to put players around them, which Colin has continuously got frustrated over the past few years that they haven't kind of looked to kind of make sure he has enough players at his disposal. I think they've done their utmost to help him out. I think they'll bounce back. I think they were in the playoffs last year with all due respect for the quarterback, not at the level of Lamar, and still nearly pulled off the victory. And unfortunately, then kind of went and threw that particular quarterback under the bus thereafter, as if he was the cause for the reason for that particular loss. I've gone with the Browns to make the playoffs, and Colin jokes because every year I try to find a team that I think can navigate away. And last year, I went with Seattle, and people thought I was a bit off my mind at that stage. I think the Browns have done some great stuff this offseason, and it's not a popular pick because of the Deshaun Watson factor, but I think more so from a defensive standpoint, they brought in some nice additions. They brought in Jim Schwartz. Sometimes the best signing you have is, in fact, a coach as opposed to the players, and he's been tried and tested around the league. I think he will come in there and do a good job there. So I've gone with the Browns to be my ultra wildcard team and slip in as the 7th seed, but I would be very confident on the Ravens being in the playoffs again.
Colin, who's the wild card that you feel has the mostest?
For me, I think I agree with Brian that I expect the Ravens to be very strong. But I think for me, the Jets, I think, should end the longest playoff drought in the NFL. You look, Aaron Rodgers looks rejuvenated, and that, I suppose, tandem with Garrett Wilson, I think, has the potential to be absolutely phenomenal. I like the defense. The issue all last year was around the QB. The one concern is on the tackles, but I think they can get through the regular season and into the playoffs even with that line. So to me, I think for the wild card, that they would be my kind of banker in that respect. Now, though, that O-line, that's an issue come January, certainly, but we can talk about that at that point.
Yeah, I hate the way this is trending, Colin, but I'm going to have to agree with you. I think that the Jets are the team of my wildcard picks that I'd be the most confident in. I just can't see them not making the playoffs with everything they've got going for them and with everything that we've seen since Rodgers slotted in. I think that's been such an interesting trade. Obviously, so much ink expended on it in the offseason. But I think because it seems to have rejuvenated both franchises, and we'll talk about the Packers a little bit later when we get to the NFC, but and it's rejuvenated Rodgers himself. I mean, I know I had made a joke on Twitter that the actor who's playing Aaron Rodgers is doing a great job in Hard Knocks because he's really taken the character in a whole new, interesting direction. He seems happy for the most part. He seems to be really getting on with his teammates. He seems to like the coaching setup and everything. I know they're very much in the honeymoon phase, and we'll wait and see what happens when they hit a bump in the road. And we've talked about it at length, the fact that they do have a tricky enough start to the schedule, but you can see the way the defense is really kind of feeling itself as well. Like they seem to be setting themselves up for what they feel is going to be a big season for them. That Wilson Rodgers connection, little enough of it as we've seen in the preseason, and preseason is only preseason, but it looks to be right on the money. And you heard Rodgers saying after that lovely toss on the final play of their drive before they pulled their starters against the Giants, first of many, bro. That's going to be the first of many. You really felt like he meant that, and that's a connection that we're going to see over and over again this season. I don't see them necessarily winning the division. I still think the Bills are the team to beat there, and I don't think the Bills are going to be toppled. I can't see any way that the Jets are going to fall short, given them the massive upgrade they've made there. Short of Rodgers, and he is the oldest player in the league this year, short of Rodgers somehow picking up an injury, which I wouldn't be massively fearful of, given his relatively clean history and the decent offensive line he's playing behind. Brian, is there the wild card pick that you'd be locking in there?
Well, I'm actually more interested to see your take on the Dolphins, Connor, because we were quite high on the Dolphins last year, and they made the playoffs. They played a really good game against the Bills, and they seem to give the Bills probably the one. For me, like, they always seem to play the Bills so tough, and they've got a great roster. They're kind of floating under the radar. I haven't selected them. I think things will go against them, such as the nature of how competitive the Jets will be. So I was torn between the Jets and the Dolphins, but I went with the Jets because obviously what's expected, and you've obviously covered it very well there in terms of this Jets team. Yeah. But you still have two of them finding their way in, three teams from the AFC East finding their way in.
Well, I'm going to say you've kind of called me out there, and I'm going to have to, I think, throw in the first twist of the night. And I hate to abandon the Dolphins because I still like a lot of what I see. I love Mike McDaniel. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does this year. I think he's going to have a whole new bunch of schemes, and we're going to see some fun stuff from them. Really hoping Tua stays healthy, and obviously that's a big caveat in everything I expect him to do. But just, it's funny when we're going through it division by division, and we talked about this off air a little bit early on. you make a pick one way. When you actually step back and look at it as it's displayed on the graphic there, and you go, I have 3 teams from the AFC East, which, as we know, or as many people will know, actually has probably the toughest schedule of any of the divisions in the league this year. That they have, according to the analytics gurus, the collection of the toughest schedules between them. I think the Jets have the number 1 toughest schedule. Again, going by the numbers and based on where last season finished up of any team in the league. And when I looked around again, you're looking at there's quite a few teams I'm overlooking there. So look, long story short, I'm going to twist on the Dolphins. I'm throwing the Ravens into the mix. I think if division is going to throw another team into the playoffs, if there's a wild card team that I would replace the Dolphins with, I think it probably has to be the Ravens.
So
welcome in. Yeah, welcome in. We're all aboard. Obviously, the Ravens. Although I think it's interesting. That some of us have the Steelers in there, and I know Shane asked the question around Kenny Pickett. I think when it comes to QBs, generally what you see is QBs tend to get named as captains, almost by default. If they don't, I think that's almost something to keep more of an eye on. I know CJ Stroud has been named as captain in year 1 for the Texans, and it's generally the case. And I go back to the fact that Tebow was that for the Broncos, but as Jim Trotter told me, Champ Bailey said how hard it was to play and to the sort of football Tebow used to play. So to me, the Pickett thing isn't it, but I think with what Mike Tomlin and the Steelers have done, I expect them to make noise this season. Yeah.
Gavin Smith throws in an interesting comment there, and it's one that had literally occurred to me almost at the same time it came in there. None of us have a second team from the AFC West making the playoffs. So we've all factored out the Broncos, even though Peyton, you would think, is a massive improvement as head coach. None of us can quite see that making the difference and seeing them going from where they were to the playoffs. We're also overlooking the Chargers. I think there's widespread lack of belief on this show with Brandon Staley is probably the reason there, unless anybody has another factor. But in some ways, it's a big statement to overlook Justin Herbert. He's someone I do expect to have a big season, and I know he'll probably be somebody who's heavily selected in various fantasy teams. Again, I wavered between them and the Ravens when I was doing my pre-show twisting. I was half thinking that I might just throw the vote of confidence behind the Chargers to make a late run and make the playoffs, but I just couldn't convince myself that they'd be the team to pick above the Ravens. I have to say. Any other twists on the wild card, lads, before we move on? Am I the only one who's wavering in his belief?
Well, sorry, Colin. Like the Chargers, for me, it's all about Brandon Staley and it's all about this defense. You're right. Like we all love Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, and in all likelihood, with Kellen Moore there, only making this offense better. And obviously, they've done some nice things in the draft, giving them another explosive wide receiver. Oh, I don't think that's going to be the problem. I think we spoke about it last week. You envisaged watching great Chargers games, 34, 30, 31, 38 type of games. But ultimately, they'll come out on the wrong side of it because their defense just hasn't got to the level in which you should after 2 or 3 years of trying to correct so many different things. It'll be interesting to see if this is finally the year in which they can put this together. Myself and Owen Haley, who is a regular viewer of the show and obviously was very good to us in terms of doing the sound at our live show in Buskers on the Ball recently. He's a Chargers fan, and we've had a charity bet this year. I think I've given them that they'll win. I think I took 9 or less, and he took 10 or more. So there you are. So someone will be donating money to a good charity come January. I imagine it will be Owen. It won't be me. I'll be stunned if it's me. But anyway, here we go. Aidan, it's worth maybe discussing Aidan's because we just on the Steelers there, Connor. Aidan, obviously, he does all our fabulous graphic work. I mean, he's very high on the Steelers. But has them to win the division. Bear in mind how competitive we just discussed with the Bengals and the Ravens.
Well, I think you can make a case for any 3 of those teams, and I know you're reasonably high on the Browns as well, even though you don't have them making the divisions or making the winning the division. You have them making the playoffs. I don't think it takes much for the Steelers to get there. And again, I've said it before and I say it again, you kind of nearly factor in 9 wins with Mike Tomlin. And it's how many more beyond that they get that determines whether or not you can make the case for them winning the division. I think we'll see how they go. Wide receivers have looked electric in preseason. Pickett looks to be growing and developing. They hopefully get a full healthy season out of TJ Watt. I think that's a massive difference if that goes their way this year. That health is obviously a factor for all teams. We talk about it all the time, but that was a huge loss for them, and did make a difference in how they finished up. And they still managed to come out 9-8. But I still think Ravens and Bengals are ahead of them in terms of their development curve. But I don't have them making the playoffs, but it's not a difficult argument to make, and I don't think anybody is going to be too keen to come at Aiden on that pick. We'll see how it goes. Any divisional champion? Like, I don't think any of us are twisting on the divisional champions, but who of the 4 in the AFC would you waver over if there was a moment of doubt?
That's a good one.
I think the Jags are boom or bust. I mean, I'm going to go with the boom side of things, but I think you could make an argument that the Jags defense is terrible, that things fall apart, that they don't get the production out of Trayvon Walker, last year's number 1 overall pick, and that ultimately they become, this year's Chargers, who end up losing games at 38, 34 and stuff like that. I think Trevor Lawrence takes jump, but to me it's banking on their defense. And in the Titans, you have Mike Vrabel. They're great coach, and despite all of their problems last year and the QB injuries that they had, they were there or thereabouts. It was only in that week 18 game that ultimately the Jags pulled it out of the bag. So I'm going to say it's boom, but I could well end up with egg on my face come week 18 of the regular season.
Yeah, that was one I have to say that I did go back and forth a little bit on when we made the original picks. I didn't necessarily see enough of a case to jump and twist on the Jaguars and put the Titans in the driving seat there. But I think you get Tannehill back. I think you know what you got from him. Like the ceiling is certainly not as high as some of the megastars that we have in the quarterback position in the AFC, but the floor is much higher than most people. I think you get good solid play. A lot then depends on what Derrick Henry's 30 this season, is he? There's a lot of mileage on that clock. We know what he can do when he's at his very best. And they look a little bit better served on the wide receiver side as well. You're going to get that tough Titans defense. They're quite reliable there, and they're quite consistent. I think they will go as the Jaguars do or don't in a funny sort of way. I think if the Jaguars slip up at all, you can see the Titans taking that division. I'd still be confident enough in Peterson. I'm still very confident in Trevor Lawrence, who, in some ways we haven't talked about a huge amount in the offseason because there's been so much hype elsewhere and there's been so much else to talk about. But that's another exciting one. That's another guy that I'm really looking forward to watching this season, whatever way it goes. I think, as you've said, Colin, for me, it slightly worries me that they put themselves in the holes that they put them in. It excites me, obviously, that they found the ways to get out of them in the way that they did, particularly against the Chargers in the playoffs. But there is a flaw in that team, and I'm not sure, like you, that they've done quite enough to address it since the season ended up. Brian, what about you? Any that you'd waver on, or your poker face the whole way through?
I probably would waver on that one as well, but I have picked them by process of elimination. We got 2 teams in the division with rookie quarterbacks, and you got the Titans. And right now, nobody really knows what to expect from this Titans this year. If you were to ask anybody, give me 5 teams in the NFL who you just get in one, you couldn't say yes or no in terms of what they're going to do this year. The Titans would have to be one of those teams. If they get the pass rush back to what we saw a couple of years ago when they went number 1 seed, even with an offense that's not an aggressive type of offense, I still think they could win a lot of games. But we really don't know. So I went through that particular division by process of elimination, and who's most likely to come out winning games, and that is Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. And for that reason, I'm going with them. So if you look at the other 3, the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Bengals, it would have to be the Jags that I'd be pulling the plug on. But I'll still run with them because I think the division is just not strong enough for anybody else to take it on from there.
Well, let's jump across to the other conference then and see what we have on the boards, Miss Ford. Colm, I'll start with you. Like myself, you've gone with the Lions in the north. That's certainly the one that I'm probably the least confident in. Which is your least confident pick in the NFC among the division champions that you've called out there? We might go from least confident to most confident this time around, just to change it up.
Well, I just to say on the NFC side of things, I assume Brian is definitely going to be twisting, given he's gone with the creamsicle Tampa Bay Buccaneers tribute T-shirt. Is this a love of Tom Brady? Who, if you saw Tom today appearing in the Manning Cast ad, he unfortunately looks more and more like Pete Burns. We were all spun round and round when Tom Brady was with the Patriots, but my goodness, it is looking interesting for him. To me, it is the Lions, Connor, because I think I can make a case that the Vikings win the North, Packers win the North. I probably am much higher on the Vikings than a lot of people, but I don't think the players they lost are detrimental to this team. I think Dalvin Cook is not the Dalvin Cook that he once was. I think they moved on from Zadarius Smith, but I think Flores will make them much better. I think when you've Justin Jefferson, you have the outstanding wide receiver in the league. They took another wide receiver in the first round of the draft. I think Hawkinson, while it's a big contract, I think he's a complementary piece. And I think the Packers have a very good roster, and I think Jordan Love will be fine. I don't think he'll be terrible. I don't think he'll be brilliant. I think he'll be fine. And I think that with Matt LaFleur and the roster, I think they'll be very competitive. So the Lions are really going to have to earn it, but I think they are capable of doing that. And ultimately, it was the offensive coordinator's decision to stick around because he had options. He decided he'd stick around. I found that very telling. As you reflect on it and you look what they did in the draft, it makes a lot of sense. That's ultimately why I've decided to go with them. But they really will have to go out and win the division.
Yeah, I think a case for the defense, as you say, if you're going to stick with that pick, as I am, even though I slightly wavered on it, I wasn't sure whether I was more unsure of that or whether I was more unsure of the Falcons. 3 of the 4 of us have actually picked the Dirty Birds in the NFC South, which looks like the flakiest division of the lot on paper, and we're placing a lot of faith in Desmond Ridder as we go. Although probably more reflects our confidence in Arthur Smith than it does Desmond Ridder. With the Lions, you look at the way they reeled off those 10 wins last season, and they really looked like everything was finally coming together, and a lot of the wish casting that people were doing when they kind of fell in love with Dan Campbell from that Hard Knocks year was finally starting to come true or to manifest itself. And the Ben Johnson thing, I think, like you, Colm, I think is really interesting. He could have gone, and those opportunities to only 32 places on the carousel at the end of the day, the head coaching carousel, they don't come up that often, and Ben Johnson's stock was riding about as high as it could possibly do. Him sticking around, I think, is a real gesture of confidence in the culture that's being built there and in the playing staff that they now have and in the position they find themselves in, particularly with Rodgers now gone out of the division, which kind of opens it up in a big way. At the same time, what you're really wondering for me is, do you get the same level of play out of Jared Goff, and can it sing for a second season? Everybody goes and spends the offseason pouring over the tape, of course. And, the guys that kind of, the schemes that succeeded and the guys that succeeded last year don't necessarily carry it forward to the second year. And we'll see whether that goes quite as well as it did. Brian, for you, is there any divisional champ that you'd feel is over the trapdoor now, or that you're not as confident as when you made the original pick?
It would be the Vikings. It's one I was talking about for quite some time. I think I've bought into the quarterback program, not necessarily the program in which you watch, but more so what we saw from Kevin O'Connell and the players within that organization throughout the course of last season. And I don't think that's changed. We were fortunate to have a recent interview, with Vikings players, and they did. He spoke about the fact that everyone's still bought into what he's doing and how he's a great coach. And I think the Flores thing, and Colm's rightly called out, a number of weeks ago, that Brian Flores coming in to replace a coordinator that just couldn't get out of his own way last year, unfortunately, and the defense struggled. I think we're going to see an upside on that. So I don't think necessarily we're going to see the Vikings have to be in those type of 33-30 type of games and find ways to navigate victories when it looks like they've lost, like we saw so many times last year. I think we'll see them win games pulling away from teams this year. So it is a division in which is going to be ultra competitive. I mean, I think the Bears are in for a reasonably good season as well. I know we kind of dismissed them as the team that's going to be down the bottom, but they have been quite aggressive in free agency. Certainly don't think they're ready to challenge for the title, but I think they can knock off teams within the division. I think we'll see more balanced results across the board for the 4 teams. And the Lions strike me as that team you're going to love to watch. You're going to love the witching hour when they're going up and down the field at 8:30 in the evening Irish time. But ultimately, they'll come out short in some of the games, and that's the Lions of old, and it'll still be exciting. But for me, I haven't even picked them to go to the playoffs, Connor. I've gone with the Vikings, and I've gone with the Packers.
I just realized as you say that, when we flashed the graphic up for a second time there, I'm the only one who has the Vikings not making the playoffs, so I'm picking them to have a pretty precipitous fall off the cliff, but I stand by that. Colin, as we're talking about confident predictions, let's talk about which divisional champs are our absolute locks. We've all gone for the Eagles. Would you say that's the one you're most confident in?
Yeah, I think so. My only question really is around the offensive coordinator. I will say though, it's a big season in many respects for the Georgia defense, right? They're the best college defense we've ever seen, 2 years running. But those guys are really yet to make an impact in the league. Now, the Eagles obviously took a punch, but plenty of other teams took them, and we're really looking for one of them to step up. I think Jalen Carter will, but ultimately replacing Hargrave is a big, big task. I don't think he'll be at that level. I think the Eagles will probably take, a step back this year a little bit, right? Especially, I don't think they'll win games as comfortably as they did last year. I think it'll be more competitive. I expect the NFC East to be more competitive. But they probably are, in terms of the divisional winners, I think they would be the one I would be most confident in.
Yeah, I wonder, as you're talking about the Harry Roseman halo effect, and he gets so much credit and deservedly so, but I think we're nearly at a point now where everybody expects every single move that he's made will work out absolutely fine, that everyone will step up, that all the draft picks will hit, that letting Hargrave go was the right decision, that everyone that's come in will light it up, and that's never going to be the case, right? Guys have a string of hits, and then there's bound to be a miss coming around the corner. So we'll see what happens. But I have to say, they're still the divisional champ I'd be most confident in picking. Brian, what about you?
No, I go with Saints. I think that South is very much there for the taking this year for the Saints. Bringing in Derek Carr, I've always been very high on him as a quarterback. We spoke on our live show about how his time in Vegas, Oakland, whatever you want to call it, from his previous time before they moved, that it came to a kind of a difficult ending for him and for the team in terms of how they kind of, showed him the door. And I think he'll come out with a point to prove. And I think the division is very winnable. When you look at the Falcons, I know you have selected him, and I understand the nature of why they have an explosive-looking offense. We've got a rookie in Carolina, and we've got the Bucs, and we don't really know what this Bucs team, whether they're going to be in the sweepstakes for a quarterback come the draft time, or whether they play for the head coach. We're really not sure what to expect. But I do think the Saints are ready to make that step up again. I think Derek Carr will navigate a team to get into the playoffs and win this division. And I think if they do get into the playoffs, I think they can surprise a few people because they'll get a home game. And I don't think anybody will fancy going into New Orleans come January with that crowd behind them.
I love your confidence in the Saints, Brian, and it's been a constant theme of the off season. What do you feel about the coaching though? There, do you really think that Dennis Allen is the man to take them on?
I think his defensive skill set will bring this defense. We saw last year, this defense last year was ravaged with injuries, and like we touch wood, they don't get any injuries this year. But I think they've got a lot of experienced players defensively, and I think if they get back to the Saints of all defensively, and that's ultimately his game, isn't it? Like he's not an offensive type of head coach. It's all about defense for him. And I think he'll have the measure of this team in the second year in terms of what he expects from them defensively. I think they'll be very strong as well. I think the likes of Lattimore, Cam Jordan are in for big seasons. And let's be fair, like the division it's not ultra competitive with all due respect. We don't think it's going to be. I think like it's a 9-win type of division for me, and I think they'll go over the 9 wins. But I think Dennis Allen will focus on getting this defense back to what Saints fans were used to seeing a couple of years ago, which was a really, really strong defense, complemented by an offense with Drew Brees at the time that was not Drew Brees of old.
Well, let's talk wildcard picks then. I don't think any of us have anyone else from the NFC South making the playoffs. I think we're picking that as pretty much a boom or bust division. Column of your wildcard picks, who's your dead cert?
It should be the 49ers. I mean, I'm the only one who doesn't have them as the divisional winner. It's 2019 was the last time the 49ers had a quarterback play a full season. Brock Purdy comes in with all sorts of questions to me, and he had major surgery. Can they keep him upright? That's ultimately it. I think also there are question marks on some of the other 49ers players regarding, the staying healthy. Like starters, fantastic, right? Outside of QB, where you'd hope Kyle Shanahan can work his magic. But what if Trent Williams picks up an injury? What if Kittle picks up an injury? What if Christian McCaffrey picks up an injury? I think that's probably the biggest question. And Christian McCaffrey has a history of them. Like Christian McCaffrey absolutely unlocked that offense when he came in last year. People kind of forget, like they were struggling. Then he came in and he absolutely took it to turbo drive. I mean, they went warp speed, but they didn't have a warp engine without him. And I don't know if he can stay healthy. That was why I knocked them down, because this is a league you see injuries happen, the physical nature of it, and they have question marks. So ultimately that was the reason. But I think, they make the playoffs. But to me, that's why I ultimately went with the Seahawks. But they should be a lock for the playoffs.
Yeah, I cannot think of a better tandem for a rookie quarterback than to have George Kittle and then Christian McCaffrey in your backfield. Like you've someone who, as you made the comment about Megatron down there somewhere, you throw the ball up and you just know George Kittle has a great chance of getting it, even if it's not the most perfect throw. And we saw a few of those kind of questionable ones from Purdy last season that he kind of got away with. But when you got McCaffrey, you can just make magic happen and turn people in a phone booth in the backfield as well. It really helped his transition in. Yeah, I'd stick with that division for my wild card lock as well. I was wavering as to whether the Seahawks could actually win the division. I certainly think they're going to make the playoffs. Brian, who's your NFC playoff banker?
Wildcard. It's a difficult one. I see we're very aligned on this, Connor. So obviously it's great to see that someone.
Well, spoiler alert. That's about to change.
Oh, brilliant! I can only imagine which one of us is getting kicked out. So at the moment, it's we've got the Seahawks, the Giants, and the Packers. Oh God, I was very high on the Seahawks throughout the course of the season. I'm not calling them my banker here. I'm going to give an argument as to why I would drop them. I spoke to a 49ers correspondent last week. He said to me, Gino got that contract for the first half of the season, because if you watched him in the second half of the season, in the games against the likes of the Panthers and various other games, he wasn't that good. And people are concerned that he might revert to the Geno Smith of old, and it won't be the one in which we saw last year with little expectation going into the season. Because, like, let's be fair, the stakes are high in Seattle now. Everybody in Seattle, a year on from where they were, now expects to seem to be back challenging. We speak about their defense, how stacked they are. They keep selecting players in the draft. That we touched on it earlier about with the Eagles. Everyone just assumes Howie Roseman's selections are going to, work out. Everyone's now assuming that Snyder's picks in Seattle are going to work out this season because of last year. We don't really know if that's the case. I'm still very confident on the Giants. I think the Giants are in for a good season. I think they will oust the Cowboys from last year's. And with the Packers, I think people are underwriting this team. I have no banker within those three. I couldn't genuinely give you one that I'm 100% convinced on. But I can give you an argument as to why all three of them will make the playoffs.
I gotta say, the one that I was most considering, I'm not actually going to twist now. I've done my one twist for the night, but the one I was most tempted to twist on was the Giants, and not because I'm not pretty high in the Giants. It's because I looked at the slate and thought it's it's a big call to say that the Cowboys are not going to make the playoffs, given all the talent that they have. Like, I know there's huge question marks over Mike McCarthy, and we've talked again at length about the scapegoating of Kellen Moore, and I can see him being just fine in Los Angeles and justifying his name as an offensive coordinator when he gets his hands on Justin Herbert. But just that Cowboys defense, they're just so stacked. You know, whatever's happening on the other side of the ball, you can just see them hanging in games. I know the FTN fantasy algorithm has them as the team with the most projected wins, so it's a big call to omit them from the playoffs. But I just think there's something special happening in New York. Like, if you're looking at coach versus coach, I don't know how you could pick McCarthy over Daboll. So I think Daboll will continue to find a way to help them win. There's an argument been made that they overachieved last year and they're going to regress this year. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I'm looking forward to seeing the Jones-Waller connection. I think Waller was a great acquisition for them, and I think I'm just about on balance going to stick with them. But like you, I find it hard to bank on anyone. Colin, is there anyone that you're wavering on?
I have huge concerns around the Cowboys' weapons, because Brian and I have discussed who's going to run the ball. You know, like, that's my biggest concern. But ultimately, if the Giants coaching staff had this Cowboys roster, God knows what they would be capable of. To me, I just think and I've said it, I think Daniel Jones is the biggest limiting factor. If Brian Daboll had something else to work with, I would be a lot higher. I think Wink will be fantastic. I think this will be an absolute bloodbath of a division. They'll all take wins off each other. But Micah Parsons is a monster. He truly is. And that ultimately is what I went with, that the Cowboys might have enough in the passing game that they probably, you know, are not as maybe expansive as they once were. But I think moving on, I think Zeke signing a contract with another team was the best thing to happen, because it means Jerry can't bring him back and insert him.
But it opens the way for Deuce Vaughn as the number 2 running back. That's going to be the feel-good story of the season. Like, who could forget the tears in the draft room when his dad was able to sign the card and call out the pick for the first time ever. It actually cast Jerry Jones something of a sympathetic light. It was actually a nice moment. Let's see what Deuce can do for the Cowboys and whether he can run the ball for them as the backup or the number 2 back in that backfield behind Tony Pollard. Let's talk Super Bowl picks. Brian, if you want to flash them up there, who've we got on the box, and who've we not got in the box? Actually,
well, Colin's got nothing in the box for his MVP and Rookie of the Year, but we'll come to that shortly, because
we'll come to that.
The rest of us were able to get our selections in prompt time for tonight's show. But now, in fairness, I know Colin has been quite torn on it. I'm assuming the Super Bowl selections haven't changed. This is the matchups, and certainly from my point of view, I've gone with the 49ers to play the Chiefs. And I'll just pull it back slightly. I've also gone for the Saints to make the championship game and play the 49ers and obviously lose out. I think the Saints will be in the championship game this year. And the big shock, big surprise, but there you go. And obviously, there we have it. And I'll let yourselves take over your own selections in terms of who you're picking to be in the Super Bowl.
Colin, do you want to jump in there?
I am going to sound the audible klaxon at this point. I am, because of what's happened with Chris Jones, because of the Kelsey injury, and despite having Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, I'm going to say it is a Bengals-Seahawks Super Bowl. And I know that will be a huge surprise, but it is so difficult to go back to back. And when you're already having issues at this time of the year, we also, Nick Bosa hasn't got that contract sorted with the 49ers. We haven't mentioned that. That's another key component to factor in. You want everything to be right. The Eagles had that real feel-good factor about them. And I think that ultimately is what I'm going to go with. The Bengals were a huge surprise when they got there a few years ago. I think the Seahawks can do the same. The Eagles surprised a lot of people last year. I think the Bengals have been building towards this. I think they're going to come out and they are going to look to ensure that they're the number one seed in the AFC. And I think I'm going to change it up. I am going to say, the Bengals versus the Seahawks in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I got like 3 of the 4 of us have the 49ers in the Super Bowl, including myself. As you say, the Nick Bosa thing, I don't love. Was hoping that would be sorted out before now. Also have to say the Trey Lance trade and then bailing on Lance kind of reminded you that the 49ers don't get everything right. Brilliant and all as they have been over the last couple of seasons, like that was an absolutely disastrous draft pick, and what they gave up to get him, when you look at the players who ended up going in other directions off the back of the effectively 3 first-round picks that the 49ers used to get that pick and trade up for Lance, given that they bailed on him so quickly, absolutely disastrous. I think GMs in other situations might be looking for the exit door or being ushered towards it for a mistake of that magnitude. And we're placing a lot of faith in Brock Purdy and what Shanahan can do with them, and hoping that elbow is right after the Tommy John surgery, which is not an easy thing to come back from. There's an opinion been voiced that maybe part of the key to Purdy's success, apart from playing in the most quarterback-friendly system we've ever seen in the history of the NFL, was people simply didn't have an awful lot of tape on him. He was an absolute wild card. He was quite unpredictable, and what he did was quite unexpected, and that might not be the case, and he won't have that going for him this year when they start up. But I still think, as you've said, they're the best starters in the NFL. There's just so much talent in every available position, so many leaders on that field, so many guys who've been there and done it, and they haven't had the best of luck over the past couple of years. One of the reasons that I favor the 49ers over the Eagles to get to the Super Bowl ultimately is I kind of thought the Eagles had things fall quite nicely for them last season in a lot of respects, whereas the 49ers had quite the opposite. And you would hope that from the 49ers perspective, that bad luck doesn't persist this time around. Nobody, Brian, you're not going to change your Super Bowl picks, I take it?
No, I don't see the need to make any alterations to my Super Bowl selection. I'm very confident in both my teams. I think the 49ers were Purdy full season. McCaffrey potentially not injured this year. Kittle coming back, reasonably 100% this year. I think Bosa thing will get resolved. I think the 49ers are the standout team in the NFC to go to Super Bowl, and I think the Chiefs will find a way to get themselves to Vegas. Interestingly enough, I just wanted to say that outside the column, Aiden's gone Niners as well, but obviously Aiden he's very much bought into the Steelers. MVP picket. He has the Steelers representing the AFC in the Super Bowl.
You've Justin Jefferson. Let's talk MVPs. You've Justin Jefferson as your MVP, Brian. You're the only one of us who's. So I was going to say you're the only one of us who's gone for a non-quarterback. We don't know who Colin has gone for yet, but we'll reveal that very, very soon. But you've gone for Jefferson as MVP, and yet you don't see the Vikings making the Super Bowl. What's his path to MVP
then? The numbers in which he could put up over the course of the season, the touchdowns. I'm not saying they're a one-man offense, but he's the type of player now that we've seen in the past where, and we spoke recently about that game against Buffalo Bills in last November, where it was a Hail Mary type of play and he pulls it down. He's kind of become a player that's to a large extent uncoverable. And okay, we've seen games like in the playoffs against the Giants where he was taken out of the game, but over the course of the season, his numbers and his play are just fantastic. And I think we're so focused and so used to seeing quarterbacks. I just thought let's go for someone who was great to watch, entertaining, and hopefully will put up huge numbers over the course of the season. So maybe it's a bit of a punt, but I think it's time for a player of that quality to be reflected. He'd be reflected soon with a massive contract. It'd be nice to see a player like that reflective in terms of the awards and the accolades that come with his performance on the field.
Colin, your MVP, drum roll.
It's not. I'd love to see Justin Jefferson win it, but ultimately this is a QB award, and if I have the Bengals being the going to the Super Bowl. I know it's a regular season award, but I just said that I expect them to come out and go hell for leather to get that number 1 seed. So I'm with you, Connor. I think it's Joe Burrow. I think year 4 in the system, albeit one of those obviously injury shortened, but ultimately he's had the same receivers. They've upgraded the line. I think the running game should be better. They make it really good adjustments. Like, think about how last year they went to playing in the gun rather than playing under center to help the running game. That's you could start this and you could say, look, it's Patrick Mahomes' award, but it's kind of who outside of Patrick Mahomes. I do think it would be great to see it go to a non-QB because it really has become just a QB award. But I don't see voters going that way, unfortunately.
Any chance of a defensive player winning MVP? I know Fred Flunk in the comments has said Micah Parsons, who's a pretty good shout if the voters ever went for defensive players.
Yeah, like you'd love to see them kind of recognize the players that are out there, and I think Parsons is certainly my favorite for defensive player of the year, and I do expect him to have a monster season. I think the fact that they kept Dan Quinn around is a huge help. But for MVP, I mean, what would you'd need to be. Like, he'd have to be breaking Reggie's record of more sacks than games to ultimately, I think, be in with even a chance of getting the MVP.
Brian, you've the Browns rolling this year. Would Myles Garrett be a shout for defensive player of the year in your view?
I think for any defensive player to win it, they would have to be literally taking over games, and that to me is like 6 or 7, 8 type of games consistently over the course of a season, where they're winning games, and the storyline is how dominant the defense was in that particular player. It just doesn't happen, unfortunately. Maybe it should, but like realistically, I think we're talking about a wide receiver not getting, and that's too big of a show. It's a similar scenario with the defense. Micah Parsons a great show. You could argue Bosa in San Fran, if he comes back against this contract, he to me would be the most likeliest player to come out of this particular award as the MVP.
Let's wrap it up with rookies then. Brian, we'll go back to you first. Who do you think is going to be in the running for rookie of the year, and who do you think is going to take the award?
I've gone with Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back, second running back selected in the draft. Bijan Robinson was the key talking point. Everybody felt that the Lions reached to move up to get him. Well, they'd already done a trade, and they selected him with their first pick. And the nature of this Lions team this year in terms of their offense and how explosive they could be, whether they're winning the games or not, to me, kind of lends a hand in a team that would have an explosive running game. We've seen DeAndre Swift move on. We've seen David Montgomery come in from the Bears. I think he's in to complement a run game that will all run through Gibbs. And I think Gibbs is the type of player that we could see a Saquon Barkley type of first year where he breaks out and he's a standout player for the Lions. So for that reason, I mean, a lot of people will feel it's Bijan, but I wanted to go somewhere different. And when I considered both of them, I thought which offense is more likely to be explosive and have those big plays, and that for me is the Lions. So on that basis, I went with Gibbs as the running back from the Lions to be my rookie of the year.
Colin, who's your rookie of the year?
I think it may not be Bijan who gets it, because Bijan could ultimately be in the running for offensive player of the year. I wouldn't be surprised. I think the entirety of the Falcons offense is going to go through Bijan. Though I think Garrett Wilson would be my favorite for offensive player, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was to be Bijan. In terms of, another rookie, I think Zay Flowers. I think he could be a really, really nice piece. He's come in. He doesn't have like doesn't have to be everything for the Ravens, because Odell is there and Mark Andrews is there and Lamar is established. So this is not, Jerry Jeudy coming into the Broncos a few years ago where the quarterback was terrible and there was really not a huge, nobody else. No, there was enormous pressure from the off. Flowers can be a very good player in a very good team, and potentially somebody who may, though I like Brian's reasoning as well, that it could well be Gibbs.
Yeah, I like, from what I've seen, I like Jackson Smith and Jigba. Obviously, the little wrist injury, not ideal. Zay Flowers, I think, is tremendously exciting. I've gone for Bryce Young. I just think everything we've seen and heard from him, not just the poised play on the field, but the noises out of Carolina. I think, again, a shout out to Phoebe Schechter and the Sky crew. She gave us a lot of intel on what it was like going over there and meeting them and the impact that he made on their entire crew and how impressed they were by just his knowledge of the game, his ability to read. I suppose, people have put so much emphasis on his height or lack thereof, the whole, canard about difficulty seeing over the offensive line, at the same time, not something that seemed to particularly over bother him in college. I think if there's something that you've seen from Young that I really like, it's that he's clearly compensated for that by his mastery and his research and what he's done to master the pre-snap read. I think for a rookie, look, you don't expect him to slot straight in and be Tom Brady, but I think he's gonna win on the basis of what he can do pre-snap and his confidence and the leadership that he's already seems to be showing in that dressing room. I think he's going to be really exciting. It's going to be a tough enough season for them because he's not got a huge amount of weapons. But I'm looking forward to see what himself and Frank Reich can cook up between them. I think that's going to be fun to watch. That's something that I'm really looking forward to. A couple of interesting defensive players, I guess, on the rosters in terms of rookies. That we should probably discuss before we wrap. I know Will Anderson is one that I've talked about that I'm excited about. I think, Brian, the Eagles have got something of a steal in Jalen Carter from what we've seen as well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, look, it was one of those on the night of the draft, especially as a Giants fan. And I know the Bears moved around with him at 9 and 10 in terms of the selections. But as he was dropping, you just inevitably knew he's going to be an Eagle in the next hour. But it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. I mean, this team last year had a very, very good season defensively, and there was various players that came through the rookie class last year, such as Davis, that didn't get the amount of snaps that we would have seen in other teams. If he was playing for another particular team, he would have played 60 to 70% of the snaps. It'd be interesting to see how aggressive they are in terms of using him so early in the season. But no, he looks a standout player. He would have been, with all due respect, the first round pick if it wasn't for the off-field stuff that we had that led up to the draft. So be interested to see how he gets on so early on in the season. Because sometimes it takes a player a bit of time to get used to the surroundings of obviously being in the NFL.
Colin, give us a defensive rookie who may have a shout at Rookie of the Year, although ultimately I suspect it's going to go to an offensive player.
To me, Weatherspoon with the Seahawks, he's exactly the type of corner that Pete Carroll likes. He is physical. He is confident. You need to have that confidence to play, a corner. I would agree with Richard Sherman. I know Michael Irvin made a big song and a dance when Richard Sherman rightly said that playing corner is harder than playing wide receiver. It is, because you're backpedaling. But Weatherspoon, I think, can be a really nice addition and brings a physicality that the Seahawks have lacked a little bit in the secondary since the Legion of Boom days. Bobby Wagner is back in there. Tariq Woolen. They will be, them going up against the Niners, them going up against other teams. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that sure is, and they're going to hurt people. I think I like him, as you say. He could be this year's Sauce Gardner, although not that last year's Sauce Gardner looks like he's going anywhere anytime soon. Judging from what we've seen, they're set to light people up on defense as well, and we're not too far away from seeing whether that pans out as we've predicted. We're back on Thursday night ahead of the Thursday night opener that we've already spoken about very briefly, the Chiefs against the Lions. We'll be going into that in a lot more detail, but that's our lot for now. Thanks very much for listening to the Irish NFL Show.